I was watching a Chris Andre video about this interview here with Oleksandr Usyk. I have to assume this is on Ukrainian television. And in this interview, well, you can look at the title of the video. It says, Dereck Chisora's gloves had no padding, exposed by Oleksandr Usyk's team, and Eddie Hearn ignored them. So Chris Andre talks about this. You know, he finds it alarming and what have you. Big up Chris Andre, by the way. I've watched the interview. I've listened. Well, I've read, because I can't understand Ukrainian. I've read the subtitles and seen what they had to say. And honestly speaking, I don't really see any big story here. This is pretty standard fare in boxing, as in disputes over gloves and the size of the ring, because that's another thing that they raised, that the ring was very small. Boxing is a very unregulated sport. So there are lots of different size rings. There are lots of different types of professional gloves, fight gloves. Some have got very soft padding. Some have got hard padding, different types of padding, horsehair, foam, combination of horsehair and foam. Certain gloves are approved by certain commissions, but other commissions don't approve those gloves. So it's very, very unregulated boxing. This is not like amateur boxing, for example, where they only allow, I think, 1 or 2 different glove manufacturers to be used in amateur boxing bouts. And the gloves have to fit a very specific criteria. They have to have certain specifications to be allowed to be used in amateur contests. Whereas in professional boxing, it's a much broader scope in terms of the types of gloves that can be used. Okay, so fighters complaining about the opponent's gloves is very common. Now, as you can see on screen from the part of the subtitles you can read there, when Mayweather fought Maidana the first time, he complained about Maidana's gloves. To be clear, there was nothing wrong with Maidana's gloves, according to the commission, the Nevada State Athletic Commission. They were happy with Maidana's gloves. They were Everlast MX, which are a horsehair and foam blend. They are very, very soft gloves. You could feel your knuckle through a pair of Everlast MX. That's how they always are. So it's not like Maidana's team did something dodgy to the gloves. No, that's how Everlast MX are, that you can feel your knuckles through the padding. And that's why Mayweather looked at them and said, there's no padding in these gloves. But Maidana hadn't done anything wrong. Maidana had fought in those gloves many times before. He fought Amir Khan in those gloves and many other opponents. And countless fighters use Everlast MX. Tyson Fury used Everlast MX in the first Deontay Wilder fight. So most commissions approve Everlast MX, despite the fact they're very, very soft gloves and you can feel your knuckle through the padding. So with the Usyk-Chisora fight, a small ring favors Chisora. Yeah, that's pretty standard fare in boxing. That is often decided long before the fight takes place. Sometimes they can spring it on you on the night of the fight. That's the nature of the boxing shenanigans, unfortunately. And as far as the gloves, well, based upon what I saw them say in this conversation, it would seem as though at the gloves meeting, which is always held the day before a fight, sometimes 2 days, but usually 1 day before the fight, at the gloves meeting, both teams meet up along with representatives from the commission, or in this case, the British Boxing Board of Control, and they are allowed to inspect the gloves. They pick which gloves they're going to use, and then the other team is allowed to inspect the gloves. It would seem that it was at this gloves meeting that Usyk's team expressed their, I hope I haven't called him Povetkin at all in this video, because I've nearly done it. But Usyk's team expressed their discontent with the gloves Chisora was wearing. It would seem that it was at the gloves meeting. Now, Chisora was wearing Fly gloves. Fly are not a brand that is used all over the world. to the extent that it's used in Britain. So a lot of people look at Fly gloves and they're not sure. I've never seen this brand before. They're suspicious. And sometimes a team will try to make a fuss out of the gloves the opponent is using to unsettle the opponent more than anything. Other times they might have legitimate concerns just because they don't know the brand. But ultimately, it comes down to whether the commission, or in this case, the Boxing Board of Control, approved the gloves. And they did approve Dereck Chisora's gloves. He was using Fly gloves. They approved them. So really, the issue, if you have any issue about the gloves, you have to take that up with the commission. You have to take that up with the British board. It's no good taking out with Chisora's team because those gloves were approved. According to Usyk, when he raised the issue, or when his team raised the issue of Eddie Hearn said, you can also wear these same gloves if you want. You can wear a pair of Fly gloves, the same pattern as Chisora's gloves, because they've been approved by the commission. But Usyk apparently declined to do that. I mean, it was the same when Mayweather fought Maidana. I think Maidana's team said, hey, Floyd, you can wear these same gloves if you want. We're not doing anything improper. You have the opportunity to do the same as us. But Mayweather, having very brittle hands, of course, he declined. He wears a much more protective gloves than Everlast MX. So, yeah, that's what I'll say about it. This is just standard fare in boxing. There's always issues about gloves. There's always people complaining. There's always shenanigans with rings and spongy canvases. That's another thing they mention in this interview, is the spongy canvas in the Klitschko fight. There's always issues surrounding things like this. I'm not saying it's right, but it's standard fare. It's nothing unusual at all. It goes on all the time on small hall shows, on big shows. It's just the standard thing that goes on behind the scenes. So there's really nothing Oleksandr Usyk can do. He can't sue Eddie Hearn or sue Chisora. The only people he could take issue with is the British Boxing Board of Control, and maybe get them to address the gloves and say, hey, why are you approving gloves like this? They need to have more padding in them. They need to have more firm padding than the very soft padding you have here. But I'm sure the British board will say, well, we approve Everlast MX, and other commissions around the world approve Everlast MX, and these are no softer than them. So it is what it is. You have to talk to all those commissions as well. So I think it's much ado about nothing, to be honest. I don't really think there's a story here. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And also, in this interview, the interviewer, to me, was blatantly looking to try and get a sensationalist soundbite out of Usyk. He was trying to put words in his mouth. Now, Usyk wasn't necessarily denying the things that the interviewer was saying, and perhaps Usyk was doing that because he was concerned about any legal ramifications. I don't know. But either way, the interviewer was looking for a sensationalist soundbite, and he was trying to put words in Usyk's mouth. So a lot of the stuff that is said in this video doesn't come from Usyk at all. It comes from the interviewer, But ultimately, Usyk won the fight. I believe he's out of contract now with Matchroom, so maybe he won't go back to Matchroom. We'll see. But he apparently wasn't happy with the gloves Chisora wore. And the interviewer says, so you fought Chisora with gloves that was basically just leather and no padding at all. That's clearly an exaggeration. Go and look at the fight for yourself, and there is padding in Chisora's gloves. To say there's no padding, again, this is a sensationalist exaggeration. There's padding in there. I'm sure it was very soft padding, but there's padding in there. Look at the shape of the glove. If there was no padding, the middle of the glove would be what? Caved in? The leather would look like baggy, It wouldn't have like a uniform shape over the knuckle if there was nothing but leather there. But they do. Go look at Chisora's gloves in that fight. So to say there was no padding is an exaggeration. There was padding. Same way for Maidana's gloves when he fought Mayweather. There was padding in the knuckle. It's just it was horsehair padding, which is very, very soft, and you can feel your knuckles through the glove. So that's all it was. Some people say that they need to regulate boxing and they need to standardize the type of padding you can use in gloves. I can see why people might want that, but I personally don't think that is a fair thing to do, because different fighters have got different bone density in their hands and whatever. Some fighters have to use a more protective glove because the bones in their hands are more brittle, whereas other fighters don't have that problem, so they can use horsehair gloves or less protective gloves without mashing their hands up. And I like the fact that fighters get the opportunity, because at the end of the day, everybody is not equal in terms of their physical ability. And when I say physical ability, part of physical ability is having certain attributes like more dense bones. That's the luck of the draw. That's the genetic lottery. Some people have got naturally a better chin than other people. Some people have got more fast twitch muscle fibers than other people. And some people have got more dense and robust bones. So they can get away with using a glove that's less protective. I don't like the amateur system where all the gloves are basically the same. And amateur gloves, by the way, are horrible. If you've ever put on a pair of AIBA approved contest gloves, they're terrible. They feel awful, and they are designed so that you can't make a proper fist because they want to try and reduce the number of knockouts in amateur boxing. So they make you wear these gloves, which they've got a hell of a lot of padding on the knuckle. The way they're configured, they've got no padding at all in the wrist, which is Velcro, and all the padding is on the knuckle, and it's very difficult to make a proper fist in those gloves. They're absolutely horrible to use. Professional gloves, obviously there are loads of different models and different padding and different brands, but many professional gloves are very comfortable. For example, like Rival Guerreros are very comfortable gloves. And in fact, I always thought that the softer gloves were a bit more humane than using some of the more protective gloves, professional fight gloves, because if ever you've put on a pair of Rival Guerreros with the HDEF foam, because they've got two types of Rival Guerrero fight gloves. They've got the soft foam version and they've got the hard foam version. Now the soft foam version, yeah, they're very soft. You can feel your knuckle through them. But the hard foam version, I'm telling you, they feel like bricks on your hands. And even more extreme would be our Everlast Elite fight gloves. You put a pair of Everlast Elite fight gloves on, it feels like you got a brick on your hand. That's how hard the padding is, if you can call it padding. That's how hard the padding is. So yeah, it protects your knuckles, but it's going to mash up your opponent's face. I'd rather be hit by an Everlast MX glove than a Rival Guerrero or an Everlast Elite. Because it's like getting hit by a brick. It's like, what's the difference between getting hit by that and bare knuckle? I mean, not much. So obviously, bare knuckle, the knuckle ridges stick out, and therefore they can do more damage in terms of causing cuts and stuff like that, and cause more impact. Whereas if you've got a protective glove on, even if the padding is very hard, it makes the surface more uniform, so it dissipates the pressure when it lands on your face, right? But anyway, let me know what you guys think about all I've discussed in the comments below.